So it's 2 p.m. I hope that more participants will join later, but we have to start right now.
Okay.
Once again, may I request all of you to please turn on your camera for a while to say hello for the lecturers to see your faces before we start. Um, it's always good to get to know each other, to look at the face of each other before we start learning. Because usually in the online classes, we don't often see the faces of each other, and it's a pity. That's why people prefer face-to-face training. um, okay, so we start right now. Mr. Thomas Webster from Korea. It's now 4 p.m. in Korea and 2 p.m. in Vietnam. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second webinar in a webinar series of Success in Writing and Publishing, organized by CMAIL Regional Training Center in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and sponsored by Regional English Language Office, U.S. Embassy in Hanoi, RELO. The webinar series is delivered by Dr. Thomas Webster from Ewha Women's University, Korea, an English specialist from RELO. In webinar number 1, we learned a lot about the topic research writing form and style. We recorded a video of the webinars. We cut the opening ceremony and the breakout session, and we edited the video a little bit to post on the Tech4Teach platform. For those of you who did not attend the first webinar, you can watch the video again on the YouTube link that we posted on the Tech4Teach platform. Also, I think that Mr. Châu Hoàng Lang from CMAIL Retract has already sent you the account to access the Tech4Teach platform. This webinar series is not open for the public. It's just open for a limited number of participants. So we expect that you will join the series of 4 webinars, and you are provided with an account to access the Tech4Teach platform, in which you can download the materials, you can get some other extra materials, and you can also discuss in the forums the activities designed by the webinar instructor. So if you have not received the account, please send an email to Ms. Châu Hoàng Lang to let us know your problem so that you can access the account as soon as possible. And today, during the webinar, Dr. Thomas Webster will guide you on how to use the activities and the materials in the Tech4Teach platform as well. Today in webinar number 2, we will focus on research writing data management. When we discussed with Dr. Webster about the topic of the webinar, we found that data management is one of the most important part that we need more effort to improve our research skill. So we hope that research writing data management can be a good topic, an interesting topic for you to learn from the webinar today. So ladies and gentlemen, it's time now. So the next 2 hours is your Dr. Thomas Webster. Could you please start the webinar right now? Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. It's good to see you and everyone else's faces here. Yeah, welcome to our second webinar. I really enjoyed the first webinar. For those of you who were here for that, I hope you did too. I got a lot of good feedback. I'm happy that you have access to the web page now, as Mr. Lim said, because that will allow you to get the materials that I talk about. Okay, so that's very useful. And I should say also at the beginning here, from the first webinar, I like every person who does a series. I think any presenter who's a good presenter, I like to think my presenting is okay. I think that you listen to you find out about your participants and you try to customize for them. And so from the first webinar, I really got some good feedback from you all about things that you're interested in. And so I tried to tailor this one more to what you guys were responding, you know, what you were asking for last time. Okay, so you're going to see that we are going to talk about data management, but we're also going to talk about other topics that you guys were kind of interested in, you know, kind of some ideas from last time that we didn't get the details that you wanted. We might go back and revisit some of those a little bit. And again, you can see everything on the web page there. I have a link. I put the link already there to this, you know, to my Prezi. And I guess I want to do this real quick for you too. If I show you real quick as I'm doing it, let me share my screen. Yeah, I'm making sure I'm sharing sound here too. There we go. Okay. Yeah, you can see here, if you can see my screen, and you can see I'm on the web page. And the web page you can see again for the last webinar, webinar 1, you can see the materials that are in the folder there for you. Right? So you can go look at some of the things that I talked about last time here. And I also didn't get a chance to talk about this, but you can see that last file, the Word file, is a Word file, so you can type into it easily. It's a kind of checklist. It's kind of a sheet for you to kind of go through and think about how you're going to, you know, keep yourself organized to do a research project. Okay, so that these materials I hope were good for the last webinar. You can see I put some things up for our webinar today. And you can see that in the materials, again, I have you know, 4 PDFs there, especially this one with resources. I think you're going to like. This is something that you guys specifically asked for. And I went and actually, even up till about 30 minutes ago, I added one more thing that I got today. And I'll tell you about that in the resources. But I'm going to talk about each of these during the webinar today. But you can see here that I've put this big, in this section here, you can see there's a lot of information about qualitative and quantitative research. And then you can see some questions here. This is, we're going to have a discussion on this. And these are the questions I'd like you to talk about. So I'm going to refer you to this. If you want, I also have this in a card here. You can see right here on this PDF, if you click on that card, you can see it in a better form here where the formatting looks better. It's easier to follow. So in other words, if you guys could right now, if you have access to the page, then could you download this PDF so that you have this when you go in the breakout room so that you can, you know, we're going to do this later, not at the beginning, but I'd like you to have this so that you can, because you need to have this in order to do the discussion later. Okay. Okay. The other thing is, again, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can point over here to the chat. I like to use the chat. This is something I learned from our last webinar too, the first webinar, is that I'd like for you guys, if you could, to use the chat as much as you like, because I think it's a very easy way just to type like, you know, just something like, I have an idea, you know, just anything like that, just any little comment you want to make, then I can see it in the chat. And that's a very easy way for me to kind of get feedback from you as I'm talking. So like I did last time, I'm going to talk about a little section and then I'll check back at the chat. I'll stop sharing and then check with you. Anytime you want, though, you can speak up with your voice. You know, you can unmute yourself and say, oh, you know, I have a question. Hopefully I'll be able to hear you and that we don't have sound issues, but I'll try to do that. If we do have sound issues, then again, we can just use the chat. I think the chat is a very steady, clear thing for us to be able to communicate with each other. Okay. All right. Let me go back now and I'll just go back to the presentation then and share this with you. Yeah, so you can see my webinar here. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, real quick, I meant to do one more thing when I was sharing the full screen, which is to go to here and get back into our page. You can see that I have the Prezi link here for, again, if you click here, you can see the link and you can click on it right there and get that in another window if you want while I'm speaking, okay? So if you click that, then you can see that it'll take you to your own presentation where you can fool around with my presentation. You can do what you want. So I'll go ahead and copy this too, just for some of you to make it easier. And I'll stop sharing for a second and put that in the chat for you if you want to use it that way. Okay, so again, you can have access to what I'm talking about, to my Prezi, in a couple different ways, but I'm going to go back now and, okay, I don't need to use this myself. I already have mine open. Okay. All right, so you can see what we're going to do. Again, I always have an intro and an outro, and the outro is always a chance for us to, ask any questions or to get any kind of feedback. But the intro is kind of a warm up. We're going to see, but you can see we're going to be talking about in the second bubble there, we're going to be talking about choosing your approaches, choosing how you're going to start a project. That was something that I think a lot of you were responding about, is that, like, how do I get going? How do I choose a topic? How do I, and then second was, oh, how do I write my research questions, and how do I get going with a proposal? And so I think when it comes to data management, as I mentioned last time, it's important for you to be organized from the start with your data management. When you hear the expression data management, you might think that that is just like your graphs and your, your, like, if you have a survey, your survey results and the numbers, but data, the word data actually refers to everything that you use in your research. It's really everything. It includes memos to yourself. And again, in my methodology that I follow, it's a crucial part of the process. And so for me, notes that I write to myself are part of the data, and managing that from the start is not, in other words, data management begins with the first thing that you start, the first spots that you have and anything you write down, all of that is actually part of data. And so how you manage that, I'm going to talk about how some important points about how you keep yourself organized from the start. Okay, so let's have a warm up here. You can see that this is something you guys also talked about, is reading research. This is a little bit more detailed about what we talked about, the idea of how you make an annotated bibliography as well. But I want to show you examples, because you guys said, oh, show us examples. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you my example from my latest research that is being published, the one I showed you last class that's being published in January. And I just want to show you some of my annotated bibliographies that I did for that. And I'll work through the process and show you what I did. Okay, so again, I think examples, for me, I love examples when I'm a student or a participant in this. And so I think hopefully that's useful for you to see what I do as an example, because one thing I can't do in this webinar is I can't talk about everything. I have to choose carefully what I talk about. And so I try to give you an example that's detailed rather than just giving you a whole bunch of different things, just a little light. I want to go deep sometimes, and and then at other times kind of show you possibilities. So I'm trying to do both. So that's why I'm going to be talking about my own process, because I think it's a good example of one way of doing things. And you can, you're smart, you can adapt it to different settings or different kinds of situations that you have. Okay. The first thing to talk about is that when you're ready to start a project, this is something I do, and you can do this on paper like this. This is something I mentioned before. They refer to this as a concept map. You might know this as brainstorming. You might know this as clustering or cluster map. It's got a lot of different names, but again, as I said in the last webinar, this is where I begin. I begin by getting the thoughts out of my head onto paper. because then I can understand it better. And you can see that this example here about vegetarianism, look how they started. This is actually an example for students in college. It's teaching them how to begin a research project for writing like a research paper. But again, the process is exactly the same for students or for us, for us doing research. So do you have a topic that you're interested in right now? If you had to write a circle in the middle piece of paper, could you write something that you're interested in? What would it be? Do you have more than one? Well, again, this is data. This is the beginning of data. Getting your ideas out of your head and on paper allows you to be critical in a much more organized way. So, for example, just looking at this vegetarianism map here, you can see what the person did there. They look at the main things that they thought of. You can see up to the top left in the middle, they said health dangers and health benefits. So they thought of, okay, there's two sides to health. And then on the top right, they said, well, what about the moral reasons? And then on the bottom right, they said, well, there's a history. That seems interesting too. I think when I think about vegetarianism, I think about the history because it hasn't been around long. And then down on the bottom left, it says economic or environmental benefits. So you can see that this person began with those, like, okay, what do I know about vegetarianism? Why am I interested in it? This person was interested in vegetarianism. So they go, well, I got to think about the health, because that's why a lot of people are vegetarians. They don't want to eat meat because of the health. And some people, it's because of moral reasons, because they don't want to kill animals. Okay, and then the bottom left is talking about, well, what's the effects of it, right? The tops are kind of the reasons a little bit. I mean, health dangers and health benefits, that's really part of the reasons why you become, but you can see, look what they did. Once they said health dangers, well, what are those? Well, they said protein can actually be a danger. I don't think of protein as a danger, but too much protein is a danger. I might have put, if it was my map, I might have written too much protein, but iron can be a problem. Calcium, they think. Benefits, high fiber. Again, whatever your project is, whatever your idea is, it begins with a simple circle this is how you can start it. For me, with a project, again, that I'm going to show you, for smartphones, I had an idea in the middle that was how do students, I wrote in the middle, students and smartphones. That's all I wrote. I'm interested in students and smartphones. That's a general topic that I was interested in. You can see that's still already kind of narrowing a little bit, right? You want to try to focus as much as you can, but I started out with, okay, smartphones, students. And then I started making a map like this, like, okay, just like this one, benefits and dangers, right? Troubles, good things and bad things. Okay. Then I started thinking about, well, what about the other factors about smartphones? They're like computers. So what about technology? So I put a little bubble for technology. And smartphones also, I started thinking, well, let's see, what else is important for me? What do I care about? What's interesting? Or what would be part of my research if I was going to kind of look at students and smartphones? Well, I started thinking, again, like I mentioned last time, I know from previous research that one of the things that bothers me, one of the limitations, one of the shortcomings of a lot of research is where they find out what people think, but not what they do. So for me, I almost always put a bubble like that. I always have a bubble, and I call that perceptions and actions, right? Or behavior. You can say perceptions and behavior, or thoughts and actions. That's what I recommend that to you, by the way. If you do any research where those things are, where they relate, where you're going to be asking people's opinions, any kind of surveys, any kind of interviews, any kind of things where you're kind of qualitatively asking questions, you be sure and keep that in mind, because that's often a problem, a shortcoming in a lot of research. So I immediately always begin with the bubbles for those. Like, what do they think? What do they do? Something like that. And so, okay, think, what do they think about smartphones? Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, do, what do they, how do they do? What uses, what do they do with their phone? So again, when I put all that out there, I was able to kind of look at it and figure out, okay, well, where's a research project in there? Where's my research questions? What do I want to do? And again, we'll talk about that more in a minute. So here's my 3-step process to researching. So once I've already kind of got the idea, I've kind of, put something on paper and I kind of have an idea. Okay, I want to do something with smartphones and students and something about the way they, what they think and what they do and how it affects them. Okay. Then the first thing I do, I'm kind of I recommend this, but it's not for everyone. You have to find your own way. And I'm going to emphasize that a number of times, that you can't follow someone else's method if it doesn't suit you. Okay. So just take my example as one possibility, and definitely adapt it to your own personality and your time, because we know time is very important. I'm going to talk about time a lot in some different ways that you can save time. Okay. The first thing here is that I do, again, I'm kind of like a factory. Let me stop sharing just for a second to kind of have my full face and my hands. Okay, I'm looking to, if you guys have any comments since I'm out of here. Okay, I don't see anything yet, but do you know about production assembly lines? Do you know about production and assembly lines, factory assembly lines? Do you know about that kind of stuff? No, it's important. It's important here because we have a problem with time. And that's the same problem that people had. Have you heard of the Industrial Revolution? When factories first started? Well, all of those factories could not have happened without the assembly line. Here's what happened. Basically, there were so many people, and they wanted to get out so many products. They wanted to sell to a lot of people, but they couldn't make things quick enough, because back then, again, it depends on the country, but in England, where you think of Industrial Revolution in England first, they thought, well, we need a way to be able to make things, because at that time everything was made by hand. A person would grab it, they want to make something like a shoe. They say, okay, well, I'm going to go get the materials, I'm going to get the leather, I have to kill the animal, or somebody does it for me, but I have to do all these things, and I start making it. And then I go to the next part and I make the next part, and then I go to the next part and I make it, the next part and I make it. And so then when they're done, they have a shoe. And it's beautiful because it's handmade. One person or two, or just a small couple people, a few people worked on that shoe. And they did the whole thing, basically. It was like, that's like a craftsman, a craftswoman, right? But then they thought, that's too slow. And it's each time they make it, it's a little different. So the quality varies. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's not so good. So they decided we need to separate the parts. We need to say, okay, how do you make that thing? How many steps does it take? So they said, okay, it takes this step, this step, this step. And then they said, okay, what about that first step? How can we make that step? Here's all the things we need to, here's what we have, here's what we need to do. Here's the start, here's the finish of that step. How can we make that more efficient? How can we do it quicker and better and more consistently? Well, how they decided to do it was by just dividing. And that's why now factory workers, I feel sorry for them, because their life is very boring, because they don't get to no satisfaction, because they pick up a screw and they put a screw top on it and put it back down, and then it goes to the next person. And that's annoying, right? Because why would you want to do that all day? But the reason I talk about this is that this is how you can save time. This is how I've figured out how to save time, is that I realize that my personality is such that I do better if I do things repetitively together. I put things in groups to do the same task over and over and over, rather than trying to do one thing from start to finish. Do you see what I'm saying? So in other words, when I start research project, I don't start by, okay, I'm going to brainstorm, then I'm going to go search an article and I'm going to read that article and I'm going to do an annotated bibliography, and then I'm going to go and do this and then I'm going to do that, and then that's it. And now I got to go back and grab the second article and I got to come back and do the whole thing again, and then I come back. No, I don't do that. Here's what I do. And again, this saves me, this is my style, and it saved me so much time. I skim the articles. So this is whenever I have free time, because usually I have just little pieces of time. I don't have a big time when I sit down. My son comes up and wants to play with me, or if I'm at the office, I get, it's the office worker will come in and she'll tell me, one of my assistants, my chogyos in Korean, they will come up and say, I have to do something. And I get interrupted all the time. So sometimes I only have 10 minutes or 20 minutes. Instead of looking at my phone, I actually pop open and skim articles. I look at databases or online sites too, because I do this for my teaching. This is how I do for my teaching and research at the same time. I don't separate them. So what I'm doing is I'm just skimming through anything. I'll just start searching whatever's on my mind. Again, just like that brainstorming. I'll just grab something and I'll start looking. I'll just start kind of going down a rabbit hole quickly. I'll skim an article, and again, I'll go through, like, look at what I have here. After I skim it, I will save anything that looks good, anything that looks promising, just from quickly skimming. You know the word skim, skimming and scanning, right? In language teaching, we teach those things. Skimming means very shallow. You do not take time. So when I do this, when I look at articles, seriously, it takes me less than 5 minutes, less than 2 minutes sometimes to look at an article and skim it. But I'm just looking for certain things. And if it looks good, if it passed the first test, then I throw it in a folder. You can see in the middle, I said I save the good PDFs, or I copy and paste from, if they're from like an online site from New York Times, I'll copy it. I'll just Control A and throw it into a Word file with the link. I'll put the links always with the link, and that's it. I'll just throw it in a folder and I'm done. But I'm very careful to label my folders from the start. This is Data Management 101. Look what I do. You see, I have a research folder, and I have I have other folders. But research, for me, I'm weird. I put my teaching research and my research in the same folder, because my research is based on practical things. Like I said, I like to try to be, because I'm interested in that. I'm interested in what I do. Okay. But I'm very careful. I have a folder named research, and then inside of that folder, again, for this project I just did, that folder I pop open and I made another folder, smartphones. And then I have other folders inside of there too, but then I have a folder, students, perceptions, and I'll throw it in there. Oh, this is related to, this is something interesting about perceptions. And if I'm not sure, by the way, if I don't know if it's about student perceptions of smartphones, if I can't see that it's only about perceptions, then I'll just throw it in the students folder. If it's more general, like it's really just about different aspects of smartphones, then I'll just throw it in the smartphones folder. You see what I'm saying is that I put folders inside of folders, and anything that's in the perceptions folder is very specific. And anything that's in the students folder is not as specific as perceptions. And anything you see where I'm going, it becomes bigger and bigger. So again, when you set up these are kind of like Russian dolls. They're inside of each other encased. You open it up and you have another. I'm very careful with my data, with my files, to organize them, so that I just set them up immediately with nothing in them. Like I go, okay, I know I have a research folder, and my current topic now is about smartphones. And so then I'll also I know that I wanted to deal with students. I wanted to deal with perceptions. I'll put folders for anything that I think is going to be what I'm going to look at. And that's based on that mind map I made, you know, that concept map, grabbing not everything. You don't want to throw all these folders everywhere, but just grab like 2 or 3, 4 ideas out of there, and that's it. Whatever you think. And I do not read the articles at all. I don't read them. My first step, again, and I go through and I just skim an article, throw it in there. And then if I get interrupted from students or something, then I just leave it and I come back later. Whenever I have time again, I'll do the same thing. I'll just go pick up and go grab a few more articles and skim a few more. So I'm constantly throwing stuff in there. And so I end up with a whack of files. Okay, that's step one. Let me click back on here. Step two, when I have a bigger block of time, then or a definite time frame, like I know when I'm not going to be interrupted, so I can focus a little better, right? These are the times when I can have my brain can be fully focused. I'm not distracted. Then I'll go through and I'll read through articles, and then all I'm doing in the second stage is really filtering again. I'm filtering things that are, everything that's in the folder is actually reasonable and it can be helpful. What I'm looking for is the most helpful things, the things that seem exactly what I want. So while I'm organizing into these folders, I'm also figuring out what I'm interested in. You know, I'm starting to focus my project just by putting things in different folders. I'll go, oh, yeah, and I start to get more of an idea of what I want to focus on. And you can see I add losers to what I call it the stock folder. I have stock folders all over the place. Stock means it's interesting, but not relevant right now. It's not, this is like back burner. You know, that's extra in case I can't find what I need, but it doesn't seem like the best yet. So I'll throw it into another folder and I'll keep the good ones in the regular folder. But inside of each of those folders, so again, these folders up here, research folder, I have a stock file. Stock here, stock here, stock here. Stock is just like the dump. You know, for each folder, I'll have it kind of like, okay, this is not the best, this is not the best. So in this second step, I'm doing that. Whenever I have a little more time and I can look through it more carefully and it looks promising, then I'll separate those, you know, from the most promising and then put the ones that are not as promising into the stock. Okay, so you can see your data management begins with just actually writing folders, just little topics on folders. And again, you can do this any way you want. You can be more specific or general to suit. And I change it, by the way. It depends on what I'm interested in at the time. Okay, so it changes. Okay. This is, by the way, I like this. I found this. This is kind of what my thought process is in order to decide. So the first one is the title related to the topic I'm looking for. That's when I'm first looking, right? Step one. Stage one, I'm going, okay, let's see, does it have keywords that I'm thinking about? If no, I skip the article. I just get rid of it. Nope, it's not. The title doesn't look like it's going to do it. The keywords are not there. It doesn't seem to be on anything that I'm kind of focusing on. So then I'll just skip it and go to the next article. If it seems okay, yes, then I'll read the abstract. I'll read the summary, just like it says here. I do this. I'll read the abstract, the summary and conclusion. I don't even look at the method section at all. That's just details that I don't need to see. Unless, of course, if it's a project where I'm trying to decide what my method will be, then that is a keyword, right? If you see keywords that relate to a method like grounded theory or some other form, survey research or, whatever method you're interested in, that's a keyword for you. So then you would use that to decide. Okay, but you can see in the middle there, I'm looking for clear-cut aims and objectives. Does it have well-defined research? I don't think it has to have a hypothesis. I just mean, does it have good research questions, really? And are the conclusions precise? I like that one the best. I look for papers. I judge the quality of a paper by its discussion and conclusion section, especially the discussion. If they're separated, discussion and conclusion, the discussion is where I look. The conclusions are kind of extra, but the discussion is where they should go back and answer their research questions. They should address each one if it's a good quality research. If they don't do that, I don't think that is going to be as helpful to me. Because when you write a research paper, you should have your research questions stated at the end of the introduction or thereabouts. And then you should later in your discussion, after you talk about your results or findings, that the researchers should go back and answer and talk about what the answers were for each of their research questions in order. Okay. So if that seems good, is the above useful or relevant? It's what I'm looking for. Again, that's where I'll say, okay, I'm ready to throw that in. I'm not going to, this no over to the right, is the above useful or relevant? This is where that no there is where I put it in the stock folder. If it's not relevant and useful right now, I'll throw it. If it's no, I don't skip the article. I throw it into this is stage 2. I'll throw it into the stock folder because it might be useful later. Because sometimes, what I think tomorrow and what I think now and what I thought yesterday, Tom, today, Tom, tomorrow, Tom, they think differently. And tomorrow my project may turn, next week or 2 weeks later, I start learning something and I go, wait a minute, that one I read before, it seems like it actually was useful. So then I can go back into I can find it. I go, oh, I know where it is. It's in that, I didn't throw it away. I kept it in that stock folder. Trust me on this, okay? Trust me. Never throw anything that makes it through the first pass. Never throw it away. Because you will regret it so many times. Because then you go, oh, that was so good. Where did I threw it away? What was it? Wait, what was good? You're going to kill yourself when that happens. It's like throwing away a piece of gold. You found gold and you go, that's not important. You throw it away. And then later you're like, I threw away something, gold. What happened? Okay. So this is a good process. Okay. Finally, this is where on step 3 is where I'm annotating. I'm making those annotated bibliographies I talked about, like reading. I do all my annotating in one block. So this is, when I do annotating, that's when I'm really focused. That's when I know I've got an afternoon. It's like, that's the most intensive thing I'm going to be doing, is where I'm just buzzing through all of those articles, as many as I can get through. I'm going to go through and read them carefully, look through them carefully and annotate them. And then, basically, I'm going to take out what's important, what's useful to me from each one. I'm kind of like a vampire. I'm sucking out the juices and I'm going to keep the good parts. And then I don't need to go back and look later. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so that's my 3-step process. Again, I recommend it there. I see some chat questions here. Let me see if there's something here. Yeah, I see a comment here that says, the new thing to me is not many folders in one drive. One folder in another is to narrow down the topic while searching. It will save a lot of time. Yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah. What if the articles you think irrelevant turn out to be useful later? Yeah, I just talked about that. Yeah, that's why I keep the stock folder. That's the thing, is as you become a more experienced researcher, you start to realize your flaws, your shortcomings. You realize you're not perfect. And one of the things you realize is you actually become better at that. Your radar becomes better. So again, when I first started out, I remember I would throw away things, or I didn't know what to pick, and I'd have to go back and restep and research, and it really was a waste. Again, I wasn't very efficient, but I was able to start to know myself better. And so I realized that's why I put that stock folder, because I realized that who I am changes. My perspective changes week to week and month to month, for many reasons. So I never once something goes past the first stage, where I first look at it, the title and the keywords, when I first do that, I go, okay, this will make it. This seems good. This will make it past the first. So we say my bar is kind of low on the first time. It's not high. It's like, does this seem like it's related and it seems pretty good? It doesn't, it might be all right. Then I'll keep it. So my bar, I know myself now after doing research. So I'll do that. I'll go through and I'll pick them, and then that second stage is where I'll kind of be more careful, and I can look at it more carefully, and then throw out the ones that are not directly relevant to what I'm thinking at the moment, but then go back to it later. Okay. All right, we'll put that over here. I got the chat running on the side, so anytime you want to make a comment, go ahead. Okay. Reading research. This is something you all mentioned a little bit. And again, here's how I read. And this is also, someone else has come up with this. It's amazing how similar researchers are, or can be, in their methodology, right? Just their process, I mean. So reading articles, you can use what's called a 3-pass approach. And this is similar to what I just told you, right? My method is what I started with this kind of 3-pass approach idea, and then I made my own method, which I just told you about. Okay. So again, if you don't like my method, this is where I got it from. This is how it began, kind of, and maybe you can make your own method from this 3-pass approach. So first pass should take you 5 to 10 minutes. Might take longer if you're a beginning researcher, and as you become more experienced, maybe it takes less time. But the first pass, you're going to have a quick scan, high-level view. We call that a high-level view because you're not really getting into the details so much. You're reading the title, the abstract, the introduction, the headings, and conclusion. Of course, if you're an English teacher, you recognize this pattern because this is how you teach students to read academic papers, right? You tell them to read the title, the first paragraph, the last paragraph, and the topic sentence in each middle paragraph, right? To get the main ideas. Well, it's kind of the same thing. Similar, you read the title, the abstract, the introduction, and then the headings, which are like topic sentences, and then you read the conclusion. Okay, so this is your first pass. This is what most researchers do. Second pass takes longer. I say 5 minutes because I'm pretty quick at it, but 20 is better, is probably closer to what you're experienced, 20 or 30 even, maybe. But you're going to focus more. This is where you start to take notes. This is where you start to take notes. Again, I don't do this. I don't take notes. But what I do sometimes is I print out. If an article looks good at this stage, the first stage, I never print out anything ever. I told you, I just throw it in folders if it seems good. Second pass, I will sometimes print it out. And if I print it out, I might go and write notes on the side of the board. I might highlight some stuff. I'll look at the figures, the diagrams. This is what you might do. Look at the illustrations. The third pass, of course, can take hours. It's up to you. It's up to how long the article is sometimes, but it's a deep dive. You're looking at the entire article. You're selecting quotations too. You're looking for things that are interesting, and you're verifying data and logic. You're making sure this is actually a well-organized research paper. And this is where you can learn the most about how to be a good researcher, as you can see, best practices in other authors' articles. So rather than me telling you, go look at them. I'm going to show you some today. but go ahead and look at those. Okay. Oh, back up. Beep, beep, beep. We're going to watch now, unless I'm going to see if you guys have any comments. I don't see any comments. I think this is 7 minutes long. I have a video that's 7 minutes long. It's from North Carolina State, but I want to show it to you because I think it really gives you a good feeling about it, about this process, about the whole process. Okay, and it's what it is a lot of advice from different researchers in different fields. These are teacher researchers like myself who have different disciplines. They have different subjects that they teach and research, and they tell you how they do it. So you can see kind of a comparison of how researchers do this process. This is from the University Library at North Carolina State in the United States. It's for students, so you're going to see they're kind of making fun with a student in his dormitory trying to figure out how to do a research project, but it has some good information in it. So don't let that college aspect look, make it feel like you're not a college student. But we can learn a lot. Don't act proud. Learn where you can. So anyway, let's watch it. Okay. I think I have the sound going. I'm going to click it to run. And if you don't hear the sound, or if there's a problem with the video playing, I don't know how your streaming speed is, but I want to know if it's not working for you, and I see a bunch of people saying that, not just one, or then I'll stop it and I'll just kind of summarize for you, and I'll point you to this and you can watch it yourself later. Okay? But let's try to watch it right now.
So, you've got another paper to write and you need 3 research articles. You open up the first article and you are struggling to focus or even know where to start. You'll probably have to read scholarly literature no matter what your major is. Reading scholarly articles is different from most kinds of reading you do because the purpose of a research article is different from most other kinds of writing. Of course, there's format, language, and citations that can be disruptive to your reading process, but it's more than that. We sat down with faculty in 3 different disciplines to learn how they engage with the texts in their field and what advice they would give to students. What is your process for reading a scholarly article?
So I definitely skim the abstract first. And if the skim feels good, then I'm like, oh, actually, let me pay a little closer attention to the abstract. The abstract is like the easiest litmus test. If I get past that, I open the article and go right to the figures, because that in theory is, what the reviewers wanted to highlight most, main takeaways from their research.
So the standard process that I use is to always check out the abstract first. The abstract is a high-level summary that tells you all the good parts of the article, and it helps me understand, will this be useful for me to read? Is there information in here that might be new to me? So that helps me decide how I'm going to read through the article. Then I'll next read the introduction. If the methods aren't relevant or new, or they're not something I need to know right now, I'll usually skip to the results section before reading the conclusion. And sometimes I'll skim the references to see if there's something new there that I could then read next.
I am very much a hands-on tactile person, and so I have to print them out. I know that's probably a little old school, but I have, as you can see, my highlights, and I have different color schemes that I use. And I find that tactile process of reading a scholarly article really helps me to engage with what I am reading and absorb it better than if I'm looking at a screen.
How long does it take you to read a scholarly article?
Normally reading, for everyone, I think reading an article once is not generally enough to really fully absorb it, even if you are in that discipline. I think it takes, if you really want to get something out of that article, it takes a couple of passes before you can really mine that information and use it for what you want to use it for.
If it's something I need and want to remember, it can take me an hour, because that time is also used to take notes and write down the information that I want to save.
Does your reading process change when you read articles from different disciplines?
So in a lot of empirical fields like engineering and science, what's really cool about articles is that they tend to follow a really set pattern: introduction, methods, results, and then discussion. But in the humanities, you end up reading a little bit differently because they're not necessarily packaged quite as predictably. And so those articles in that field I tend to read start to finish, whereas in empirical fields, sometimes you can take the methods out, not read the methods, and still get the main idea from the paper.
I read pedagogical literature and scholarship straight through, and then I revisit. And it might take me an hour, even though it's a shorter paper, because I'm just trying to familiarize myself with, the scholastic jargon of pedagogy. So I do my Googling thing that I try to normalize for students.
Until you are a scholar in that specific field, you're not the intended audience for that, for that paper. The intended audience is another scholar in that field doing that kind of research. And so if you're a student, it can be really frustrating and overwhelming, but again, that's where giving yourself those breaks, writing questions, using resources, and that takes time. So you have to be really diligent with your time management. But the best thing to tell yourself is just not to get discouraged.
And lastly, what is one piece of advice you would give to a student who is attempting to read a scholarly article?
Don't be afraid to Google stuff. Embrace the awkward. Like, the whole point that you're reading this article is to learn. And that means inherently you are going to read a lot of words that you don't understand, and you're going to read about a lot of concepts that you don't know about. If you can find somebody to read it with or discuss it with at the same time, and it could be another peer who is equally naive to the field as you are, that's great.
Well, one is, first and foremost, I think in general, be kind to yourself, and that can look like a bunch of different things. Being kind to yourself is not putting the pressure on yourself to feel like you have to know every single thing, and in order to, use this effectively in the classroom. And being kind to yourself looks like giving yourself those mental breaks while you're reading it so that you don't become overwhelmed. Maybe in the moment it feels like being kind to yourself to just say, forget this, I can't do it. But if you really take the time to, read and annotate and absorb, it's going to be easier the second time, and then the easier the third time, and easier the fourth time. It's going to get easier every time. And that's why when you get to a certain level, even though there are still, it still might take some time, it's not going to be as much of a slog, because you're going to be trained, you're going to be ready. And so in some ways, reading a scholarly article is you educating yourself on how you learn and absorb. And that's something that college really teaches you too, is how do I work through this?
So, reading scholarly articles is hard for everyone and takes a lot of time. But now you know that depending on what discipline the article is and your purpose for reading it, your process might change, and you might not even need to read the full article. You definitely want to start with the abstract. Take breaks, and since you're not the intended audience, give yourself plenty of time to read, and don't be afraid to Google everything. Ultimately, it's about learning what works best for you.
Okay. Yeah. So the main things that you got from that were kind of, you could see that's repeating the things that I've said here, because again, these are pretty common to all researchers. You have your own method. You could see that those three professors have very different ways of reading articles, and you could see that that they've developed ways that work for them. And as it said, you become better and better at it as you do it. You develop your own style, and you become better at time management. And that was something that they emphasized there too, is time management, because you need to find a way to use your time the best that you can. I can tell you the reason I do my style separated like a factory is because I found that I would get sleepy. if I tried to do it the traditional way. Like the one teacher who said that she likes to read scholarly articles and she reads it from start to finish. If I did that style, I could not read through more than myself. I could not get through more than about 2, maybe 3 articles before I got sleepy and my mind started wandering on other things. I just couldn't do that. And again, that requires the full concentration for the whole time, or you have to read it again. You know, when you read a page and you get to the end and you go, uh-oh, what did I just read? Oops, back to the beginning again. So you got to read through the same material twice. So for me, that's why I couldn't do it the way she said. I switched to where I realized that sometimes I have little bits of time and sometimes I have more bigger spaces. So I decided, well, what can I do most efficiently in that little space? Well, for me, that's just going kind of out. To me, that's like exploring. I call this the first stage exploring, really searching, right? You're just kind of out there, kind of like, what can I get? What can I get? You're kind of collecting, you know, you're not really very careful. You're just like, this seems good. Oh, that seems pretty good. Oh, I'll take that too. I'll take this. It's like you've gone to the store, but you don't have to pay for anything. You can just grab anything you want and you can have the biggest bag you want, but be careful with that because of course, as someone, one of the participants said here, you have to be careful of not having too many things. You know, you got to learn, you know, what you're capable of. Grab just the things that seem interesting, and then put those things. And then again, for me, that's how I'm able to keep focused. I can just skip from article to article to article, and I save that concentration. I have a comment here. I see interesting. So we should find out the right way to read scholarly. That's right. As this said, you should find your own way and pay attention. Again, be a good observer of your own behavior and realize if you start kind of losing focus, you're not really getting things done, then you need to change your method. That's what I did. Okay. And the other thing that they mentioned, which I mentioned in the last webinar, is again, if you can get a group of people or even just one other researcher at your school, get them to do it with you. You know, there's book clubs. My wife is in a book club where they like to read novels. They read it and then they get together and have tea and they chat about it. Well, that would be great if you can find someone who's interested generally. The person doesn't have to be interested in your topic or they could be from a, you know, completely different area or discipline. Sometimes that's the most interesting because then you get a perspective from somebody who's not in your field. So it actually can give you new insights that are good. And again, the key is you have a good friend who is going to be friendly with you. And if you say something dumb, they're not going to not want to be with you. They're going to go, what? That was dumb. They're going to tell you, what are you talking about? So again, if you can have a good friend who's also trying to get her research done, then you guys can do it together and help each other. And again, collaborating, maybe you guys end up doing a project together. Again, the more you get your ideas out of your head onto paper, the more you start immediately writing, and the more you start talking to others, the quicker you're going to make progress because you've already got everything out there to kind of work with and criticize and change. And you've got other people that are doing the same, and you guys can kind of maybe work together and help each other. Again, I can't say that enough. Just like they said, with peers is very important. Okay. I'm going to go on to annotated bibliography here and just show you a little bit about this. We're kind of getting there on time, so I want to move ahead a little bit. There we go. So it wasn't working. There we go. Okay, here's how I write an annotated bibliography. So again, this is on the third pass, right? This is the final stage where I have a big block of time and I'm just going through articles and I'm doing annotated bibliographies on them. And I've gotten so good at it, or at least my own method, that I can do an annotated bibliography in about 10 minutes. Sometimes. I'm pretty quick. I go through a whack of them. So I'm different. I can throw 50 files into a folder and it's nothing for me because I know what I'm looking for by the time, you know, I'm able to do that because I have experience, but don't expect that, you know, too much of yourself from the beginning. Again, also, you guys are better than me in so many ways because you guys are completely multilingual. You're in a second or maybe third language or fourth or fifth language, and you're doing this. Wow. Pat yourself on the back. You're doing it. That's much harder than what I'm doing. It's easy for me. It's like, you know, doing research in Vietnamese. It's so much easier for you. And maybe you can, by the way, of course, right? So in your native language, hopefully you guys can be much quicker. But I'm talking about in English here that, you know, don't expect too much out of yourself. It always takes longer. Okay, the first thing I do when I look at the article and I decided this is one of my good ones, this is probably going to come into this is going to be part of my lit review, right? In my paper, I think. This is important. So I'll paraphrase it, what the significance is. I'll just write a short, it could be just a phrase. It could be a full sentence. It could be 2 sentences. It could be a paragraph. It depends. Usually it's just a sentence or 2. That's usually what it is. I'll show you examples. But again, the significance, the word significance relates to my narrative. I decide, immediately I'm starting to make an argument. I've read about different topics and then I'm choosing what is important based on what I am trying to focus on. So I don't report the significance as the author wrote it. I report the significance to myself to tell me how I'm going to use it. That's very important because again, when you use research articles in your paper, you are going to use that to write a story, to make an argument. You're not going to be kind of a representative of those researchers or that paper. You're not representing them. What you're trying to do is decide how you're going to use that information. So you're really, you know, being transactional. You're saying, how is this going to help me? How does this relate to my argument? That's what you're writing there. That's what I write. Second, again, perfect reference. I do it in APA style because that's my discipline is social science and psychology and education. And those are APA. Of course, if you're doing strictly, you know, more literature-based stuff, then you would use a different style like MLA. I write a short summary of the significance. This is different than the paraphrase at the beginning. This is more detailed. This has more supporting ideas, right? The significance in the beginning is only 1 sentence or 2. It's just a kind of header, really, to me. It's a pointer, it's a flag. That paraphrase in number 1 is just a flag to me, because later when I'm just searching, I'll tell you about that when I'm writing, but I'll look at that and go, oh, that's the one I want. And then I go and look for the summary, like the important details. And then I'll grab quotations. Again, I've highlighted them like the one teacher showed you in her papers. I highlighted them, I print them out. I always print out the 3rd step papers. I waste a lot of paper because I'm tactile like her. I like to print it out. I like to highlight it. I like to write on it. And I'm working with all of those in a big chunk. And then I go through and do these annotated bibliographies where I'm grabbing the quotations out and I'm going back to the original file and copying and pasting, right? Save yourself time. You never want to type it from start to finish. Okay. So look at this. These are actual real annotated bibliographies that I used for my paper that's being published in January. So see, number one, there it is. You can see this is kind of a summary. You know, it's a paraphrase summary kind of. It's a flag. It's to me telling me how can I use this reference. So you can see Supreme Court Roberts. I put the date. SPs, that's smartphones. Smartphones would seem like a part of human anatomy to a Martian, owing to pervasive use. You see how I kind of just threw any words. I don't worry about grammar. Don't even have a period at the end. I'm not worried. It's just a flag to me. So this one is about this topic, okay? Number 2, that's the complete reference, believe it or not. This is a Supreme Court ruling, and that's how you reference it in APA. It looks just like that, Riley versus California. And then you can see number 3 is a kind of summary that has a little bit more, has the important detail that I wanted to include beyond just the Martian human anatomy smartphone thing. I wanted to say Robert's opinion concerning the searches of smartphones without a search warrant. Again, when I was doing my argument, that was important. That's not important to every reader, and it wasn't important in the article. It didn't jump out as something. So again, I'm writing this to myself to tell me how I'm going to use it, because that idea of searching smartphones without a search warrant was about privacy. And I know I was interested in privacy. So that's why I put that there to help me, okay? And then number 4, you can see I grabbed a quotation, but only the part that I wanted. I didn't grab the whole sentence here because I just thought I just need that part that says the main thing, and I put the page number, I did the reference perfect so that I can just grab it and use it later. Okay, here's another one. Notice this one in the title, I put the country, India. This is a study that was from India. This is something I highly recommend too, to help you keep organized, because when you do research with different regions or countries, you want to be able to quickly say, okay, I need that India study. So I put India, and I gave a quick kind of flag to myself. What's this about? You can see I put the complete reference. That's a reference from Computers in Education. That's APA style. It's perfect. It's done. I don't have to come back and do it again. And then you can see I did 2 kind of ideas there. See those 2? I wrote 2 different kind of details, summaries to myself, like what's important. And then I have a big fat quotation, but that big fat quotation, I didn't put the page number. That's bad. I should have done that. So I'm not perfect. Sometimes I remember why I didn't, because I didn't think I would use that quotation. I just wanted to remember something about it. So that's bad, Tom. You know, last year, Tom, bad Tom, you should write the page number perfect every time so you don't have to go do it again. So I should do it, but I know why I didn't. It's because I didn't think I was going to use that quote. I just wanted to remember what was in it. Here's another example. You can see this is quite long. So again, depending on the article, some of them, you might use a big chunk because you're not sure where you want to quote. I'm not sure how I'm going to use that quote. I won't use the whole thing. It's way too long, but I'm not sure which part of it might be the best part to use. It depends on when I'm writing. Again, I'm like an artist when I'm writing. I'm thinking I need something. I need something about the parents resisting classrooms, something like that. I need something from that. And so I'm going to grab a piece depending on how it fits in the flow of my writing. So sometimes you might throw big chunks. Here's another one where you can see I've highlighted here the 2. Look at the first one, screen time increase during breaks, problems with over and underestimating use were seen to be related to, okay, you can see I'm a little bit more careful in the second summary than the first, but you can see I have a short one, a short quotation, and 2 longer ones. Okay, now going to this one. This one is one I can tell you, you can go look at my article from last week and see all of these, how I use these, if you want to go look, and because you can see these quotes. And this is one near the beginning of my article, right? This one, I knew I was going to use it. I knew it was important. It was something I knew was going to be. So what I did was went ahead in the first red box. I actually started writing my paper. I started writing my argument. This is verbatim what I put into the paper. So when I wrote this summary, in Korea, government scholarship and research are often underpinned by the widespread notion that technology has an inherent positive effect in many areas of society. And this is also true of smartphone usage, which is subsequently promoted and encouraged. Do you see how I know for a fact I'm going to use it? So I'm very careful with my word choices, and I'm writing. I'm starting the writing process already. The argument, the writing is already being done in the annotated bibliography for ones that I know. And look at the very bottom there in the quotation. I know I'm going to use this long quote. I know it. I knew it, and I did. So look what I did. I even put emphasis in it because that's the part of it that I wanted to emphasize in my writing. I knew it. So I went ahead and actually, this is a perfect quote, and I even added an emphasis that was, and I had to write that, emphasis added by me, because that's what I'm interested in. So do you see how I make different kinds of annotated bibliography listings? Some of them are quite short and brief because they're just maybe don't seem the most useful, but some of them seem very useful. And I'll actually start writing my paper now instead of waiting until later. I know that this is going to fit in there into my paper. Of course, sometimes you have to adapt it and change it, but I've gotten pretty good at it. So again, during the write-up, when I'm starting the write-up, actually, when I'm ready to start my paper, at the end, after I've done all my research and I'm ready to write my paper, I construct the argument by filling in the paraphrases and quotations where I need. So again, I'm just sitting there. When I'm writing, I know I choose the time when I'm ready to write. I feel it. I'm ready to write. It's time to write. It's the writing day. Woohoo! I get excited. I'm like, okay, writing day. Let me just do it. And I just start, I have my annotated bibliographies printed out. I have them in front of me and I have them organized by the tops of them. The studies from India, the studies from Vietnam, the studies from Australia, all the ones that are about smartphones, this aspect, I have them kind of cut up. When I get my annotated bibliography out, I have them all in one file. I cut them out into little strips and organize them with different topics. And so I'm like a painter. I have all my colors in front of me and I'm starting to write. I go, okay, I need to start with my argument, basic background, and I start just typing. And I don't worry about it being perfect, but I do try to make it flow. That's the thing I care about the most, because if I can make it flow, then that's going to save me time. I can go fix the small stuff, but I can't fix the logical problems, the big ones. That's going to take too long. So I try to do that. That's what I'm focusing on. I want to write this paper. I want to use that data. And again, this is part of data too. These quotations are part of your data. This is secondary research, right? You're going to add to your paper. So I'm ready to write. I'm sitting down there typing my sentences and I go, okay, now I need a part from that India study. What is that? Let me see. Can I find a quote there that fits? Let's see this one. Okay, maybe the quote doesn't fit, but I can paraphrase. I can just kind of say it in my own words. Again, and then I keep on writing. If I can't get the right one, I'll just put in there India study, and I'll just put that in my space, and I'll keep writing. Again, the idea is to use my time efficiently. I'm in a writing mood. I don't want to be going back and searching for the original paper again, for the original articles. That is the biggest thing I wish they had told me when I was young, when I was a first writer, when I was first research writer, is that this will happen to you. If you don't do annotated bibliographies, then you will start to write your paper and you want to get that study. You remember it, you want to make that point, and then you have to go look for it. You stop writing and you have it on your computer in a file and you go through your files or folders, or you print it out and you're looking for the paper. You go, okay, here's the paper, where's the quote? And guess what? You've lost the flow completely. And when you come back to your paper, you finally got that idea and you add it in there. It's often, I had to actually go back and read what I already wrote so that I could get back into the flow. And it was such a waste of time. Don't do that. I really recommend that you make these annotated bibliographies somehow in a way that works for you, and then you ditch the original papers. You get rid of them when you're writing. Don't have them around. They're going to distract you. Use the annotated bibliography like paint colors as you're writing. Just grab that color you need, that quote or that idea, and put it in there, or indicate it if you can't find it. Okay, go to the India study and then keep writing. Don't break that flow. Again, but you need to have your own method. I'm showing you my method. Again, pay attention to yourself, observe yourself, be objective. Notice when you're falling asleep. That's the biggest hint. When you bore yourself, then you know you're not being efficient. You know that you got to change something because you got to get your work done. You can't waste time. So whenever you find yourself not being productive, then you go, wait a minute, I need to change this. Every time I try to do this, Tom style, I tried it, but it doesn't work for me. I got to change it. I'm falling asleep or it doesn't work for me. I got to change it somehow. Okay. So again, you got to decide what works for you best. Okay. I'm looking at the comments. Anybody have a comment? Nothing? Okay. Anything? I'm moving on then. Okay. Finding your way as a researcher. Oh, good. I'm glad I got a quote. I mean, I got a comment that someone said the tips are useful. That's good. Okay. This is how you find your way. Again, this is for a lot of you said, I looked at your background that I got from at the beginning about who you are and what kind of research leveler you are. And you guys told a lot of you are beginners and you're not sure how to get going. And so I'm kind of trying to help you get started. How many, okay, I got a question here. Normally, how many articles will you annotate in the last step? Again, that's gonna vary for you. Really, it's really gonna be depending on your project. Sometimes I'll have a whack of them. I'll have over 100. But my last project, the paper, again, you can go look at the paper I wrote for that, that's in the last webinar. You can go look at that paper. For that one, I think I had a total of about 17 pages of annotated. They're all in one file, about 17 pages. So I think it was somewhere like 50 or 60, 70 of them. Yeah, okay. Finding your way as a researcher. Most researchers, as I mentioned last webinar, have a preferred method or topic or interest or both, or all of those. Finding yours is crucial for you to keep your interest, and keeping your interest is the thing that's going to keep you researching. I'm telling you, you can't start with the idea that you have to write for your, because it's a requirement at your university, and therefore I need to choose because of that and blah, blah, blah. You can't, you won't keep it up. You're going to bore yourself and you're going to waste time. You need to find what's important to you, what's interesting to you, and your method is the same. You need to choose a method that is suitable for your personality and your kind of, approach to research. Most researchers do that. And here's another reason why you have a preferred method. It saves time. If you have to choose a new method, you have to learn it. And learning it takes time. And again, if it's not your style, it's going to be harder to learn, so it's going to take even more time. So again, I don't know any researcher who changes their method drastically. They tend to do the same kind of research. And that's a bad thing, actually. If you can have more diversity, that's probably better for you, and do it. So it's up to you. Okay. So if you're if you're thinking qualitative, if you're a qualitative kind of person, what should you think about? Look at the first one, number one. Do you know epistemological? You know that long word, epistemology? Episteme, epiphenomena, if you know all of those kind of related words. You can see that this is your basic kind of start on what kind of person you are. As a researcher, I mean. Right, epistemological. Yeah, it's like your worldview, exactly. Your worldview is similar to, you got to be careful. Look what I have in parentheses there, the ontological position. If you really want to start basic with theory, are you more of a realist kind of person? Are you a person who is, down to earth and interested in what is in front of you? Or are you more theoretical? Are you a person who likes to think kind of bigger and pull away, the sky view and theory and, philosophy? What's your nature? So that's ontological. You can go look that word up, but it relates to how we can know about knowledge. You know, how can we know about the world that we live in? You know, is it something called a priori? Do you have ideas that are based on your thoughts first? Or do you need, you know, things from the world to kind of start your more realistic kind of start to your thinking? Anyway, epistemological, look, you can be more objective or subjective, basically. And you can see in the middle of those is constructivism. And that is kind of the popular one these days, by the way. That's the most popular method here, because constructivism means that you think basically that everybody constructs their meanings. Everybody kind of has a different way of seeing things. And so their perspectives are unique and important. I happen to share my personal epistemological position is constructivism, but leaning towards objectivism. Objectivism is the old traditional style, by the way. But I'm in constructivism. I fit in the middle, but I lean towards the objectivism, the old traditional style. Okay. Number 2, paradigms. This is like your research philosophy. Are you, positivism and post-positivism, that's related to objectivism. That's the old idea that we can study something and we can know it objectively. We can know what that thing is. So if we do a survey, we're going to find out exactly what the truth is, and we're going to be able to write it down. If you're a quantitative researcher, of course, you're very positivistic. You think you want to test a hypothesis. You say, will this be this or that? And you decide the answer based on your findings. And that answer based on your findings is going to be very objective, or as objective as you can make it. So if you're more of a person who likes, specific answers, direct answers that don't change with people's perspectives, then you're more a positivist. Okay. Interpretism is, that's kind of a hard one. Interpretivism is, it's of course, as it says, your interpreting is related to constructing, right? You're a person who believes that in your research, again, you believe that the foundation of your ideas, your way of thinking about research is that it can be different for different people. There's different ways to look at the thing. Pragmatism is kind of a little bit more kind of objective, but the good thing about pragmatism, and by the way, I'm a full-on pragmatist. That's me. That's if you're a person who does action research, if you like to study a problem that you recognized, you saw it, you're more of a pragmatist because you're trying to solve a problem. Problem solvers are pragmatists. That's what they are. Of course, you can be a blend of different things, but if you start to move towards advocacy, then that means you have a cause or a kind of something you believe that you want to tell others about. So again, that you can see that's a bit more subjective, isn't it? That's a bit more biased. But for example, if you generally think that smartphones are bad, right? If you generally think that technology is bad, if you know a person named Neil Postman, have you ever heard of that name? He's a researcher who's very famous, and he's famous not just in research, he's well known in the popular culture because he is famous for being anti-technology. And his ideas have kind of been proven true lately with social media. The effects of social media are very negative generally. So anyway, he is more of an advocate. He has a critical theory. He has an idea that he doesn't change. He has done research enough that he now has a critical theory. He advocates for the kind of careful kind of, putting technology away from things, kind of separating. So that's his position in all of his research now. He has that theory. He follows that. So he doesn't change. Again, preferred method. Critical theory is a preferred method. Postmodernism, of course, is just, I don't know, from my perspective, it's haywire. It means that there are no experts. Everyone's opinion is constructed, but every one of them is equal value. And so we can't say like researchers are not, anyone who studies something long doesn't know more than anybody else. That's again, I don't agree with that. So me, I'm more of a pragmatist. Okay, third, methodology. Again, this is where I think you don't change, generally you don't change number 1 and 2. All researchers kind of keep 1 and 2 because that's your nature. That's what you believe. That's what you think and what you feel. Number 3, your methodology can change because that relates to how you get your data. So you might do a theory like grounded theory. You might change and do some, again, we're talking about qualitative, right? So you might be an ethnographer. You might have a thematic analysis. Again, you might change these things. I'm, again, a grounded theory person. My number 3 is set. I like that methodology too much. I don't change it. Number 4, this is where you get into the details of that. How are you going to get your data exactly, your techniques? Are you going to do interviews, focus groups? This, I go all over the place because to me, these are tools. I think of this step 4 data collection techniques, they're tools. And your tools need to fit the project. And so these change completely for me. I tend to always have interviews. I always look at documents and records. Anyway, I want to move on. But basically, you can see that that number 4 is the thing that's going to change the most. 3 less so, 2 less so, and 1 less so. Okay, how about quantitative? Well, again, generally when it comes to quantitative, are you a person who wants to do an experiment? Or are you a person who wants to observe what's already there? You don't want to, in other words, you don't want to affect. You don't want to design something to see a change. You want to observe it naturally happening, what is happening naturally. Okay, so number 3 and 4 are more observational where you're hands off. 1 and 2 are both where you're kind of changing things. You're interested in interventions, we say. Like randomized controlled trials are the, double-blind randomized controlled trials are that's the most credible kind of quantitative research. But they're the hardest because it's very strict. You have to be very careful. You can see all the steps involved there. Cluster randomized groups can be chosen. You can do something called a step wedge design to test more than one kind of change or intervention at the same time. There's a lot of details. I can't get into it too much. If you're interested, again, I can help you if you're interested. But number 2 is kind of you can call this experiment light, like not 100%, it's like 50% experiment because these studies are not really strict. A lot of people do quasi. I would say that a lot of people that I see, a lot of the projects I read are actually quasi experimental because they don't really follow the randomized, perfect, double-blind. They don't do everything perfectly. And they often use, as you see, these techniques like ANCOVA and regression analysis. They use multiple regressions and ANOVA and other, they use statistical methods to kind of make up for their kind of lack of perfect design. And again, it's hard to do an experiment without getting money because you need money to be able to do a perfect condition and you need time and effort and you need people. So number 1 is the hardest. Number 2 is what most people do because it's more practical. Again, if you're more of a pragmatist, that's what you're going to be leaning towards probably, especially if you have busy schedule like we do. Okay, but number 3 and 4 are the easier ones because you don't have to plan any intervention. You just have to kind of similar to qualitative. Number 3 and 4 is kind of like qualitative quantitative. It's a case study where you're comparing, again, one feature to determine what's going on. Cohort studies are the same thing, but kind of sample of individuals over time. So you're kind of introducing change over time as part of your study. Those are called cohort studies too, because they involve a group that you are going to look at and for the same purpose. Okay. Here's something I just want a little side note. I'm looking if anybody adds any comments about anything. I see the time is getting to 5:30, so I want to get to a little discussion for us here. So just kind of quickly here, the best practices for naming your files. This is, This is not my best practice, right? This is what I found most researchers, again, I looked at it to verify it. I checked different methods and I kind of grouped together. This is what most people say. You need to have your own conventions. That means you have to have your own consistent style of naming. Your directories, your folders, your file names, you need to follow, be consistent from the start, because going back and changing them is annoying and time consuming. Always include the same information. If you put date and time on one, put date and time. If date and time is important, always put it there. If it's not important, never put it there. Again, follow consistent style. The order of information, do you see the dates there? If the date is important, write it in the same order, because when you're searching or when you're looking at it in a file, they will be grouped together more neatly. They won't be whack. And just those little things can waste your time. When the first listing has the year first and the other one has the month or day first, it's weird. And document, this is a key too. You need to have a key to yourself, for yourself. Keep a file where you keep kind of a key, kind of a legend, kind of a note to yourself about your naming convention, because you might forget. Again, for a project, I do this. Look at my example here. Do you see these acronyms are useful? So do you see in my research, I did phase 1. I had 2 phases, actually 3 phases in my last research. So I named them phase 1, phase 2, or strand 1, strand 2, strand 3. So phase 1 involved interviews. And I had a number of interviews. So I would say phase 1, interview 3, interview 1, interview 2, 3, 4. And then within that, if I'm referring, when I'm doing my coding, where I'm putting codes on things, I number the code. So my file name involves the phase, the interview, and the code. So you can see that there's a couple ways you can do that. I could indicate it over here by PH phase, PH1, int3, cod 12. I don't do that. I don't need that. P1, I can go a little bit simpler. P1, I3, C12, right? For me, I know myself now. I just do 1, 3, 12. But I have it in the appropriate folder. That's key, because I know that all of my phase 1 files are all in the same folder. So I know when I see 1, I know it's in the right folder. So when I open that file up and I look at all the 1, I make sure they're all 1s. If there's a 2 in there, I go, oops, it's in the wrong place. Let me throw that in 2. And then when I go to 3, again, the interview number 3 is from the 3rd interview I did, and I have a folder for that. I have all of the information, the codes that came from that person in folder number 3 for interview number 3 in the first phase. So I know if I see a 3, everything in that folder will have a 3 on it. And then 12, all the numbers are going to be different in this folder. Again, do it however you have it, but be consistent. And have a little cheat sheet for yourself, a little document where you write down anything in case you're not, when you're first beginning too, you might forget what you did. Be descriptive so others can understand. If you're sharing with other people, think about the names that you put on these things. If I was working with other people, by the way, this one I was working with, but I taught him how to recognize these things, which wasn't a problem because he thinks like me. We're both very kind of, inside. We're very, we think that same way. So he was able to look at it. But you have a unique identifier, project name, your project names and conditions, whatever it is, sequential, file extensions. Oh, this is an important thing. Keep the file extensions. If they're not there, add them, because they can cause problems if you give that to someone else and they try to open it. It might not work. You know what I mean? If it's a movie or TIFF or a doc, if it doesn't have that ending on it, it might have trouble opening it because people have different programs on their computers, and that will be annoying. And similar to that, there's a little tip here that I give to everyone, and you may not know this, but if you find a file that you double click on and it doesn't open, Have you ever tried just putting in an extension name on it? Like just add .docx on the end of any file. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't know what it is. It could be a MP3. It could be anything, but just try putting .docx on it and try opening it. If that doesn't work, then try JPEG and open it. Put MP3, open it. Again, your computer will tell you whether it recognizes that language. And if it does, it'll pop it open. And it's crazy, but it works. And it's very useful when you're sharing with other people and they might give you a file that doesn't have the extension name. Okay. Okay, here's our discussion. I'll let you guys do this for a little bit of time. We're at 35, so let's do this for 10 minutes, okay? So for 10 minutes, if we could get the administrators here. I have the card here. Look at the questions I want you to talk about. This is about what I just talked about, just trying to figure out what kind of researcher you are. So my first question is, maybe you're an experienced researcher. Do you have a preferred approach or method? Why or why not? So do you already know what you are and what you do, or maybe you don't have one, maybe you do different things. Number 2 and number 3 are just asking you about those, again, the qualitative and quantitative. So the number 2 question, in those 4 things I said, but especially the first 2 or 3, right? Your techniques might change, like me, and your methodology might change a little bit, but do you have, right now from listening, what kind of person are you? Which kind of researcher do you think you fit? Are you more objectivism or constructing or pragmatic, or are you a person who has done different methodologies like phenomenology or ethnography? What have you done, or what are you interested in? And quantitative too. Are you more of a person have you done any experimenting? Then you can talk about that. Or do you think you're a person who would feel comfortable or qualified or confident to do a research or a quasi experiment? Okay, talk about that. If we could get, I'm going to pop out. If we can get everybody put quickly into breakout rooms, that would be great. The people who are helping me. So go join when you get an invitation. Yeah, you can type it over in the chat if you want. Okay, stop for a second. Before we put everybody in breakout rooms, because that takes time and all that, let's have a vote real quick. In the chat, just tell me whether you'd like to do this by chat or by talk. So if you'd like to get into a discussion room and talk about these, then put talk. If you want to just do it in the chat here, then just write chat. So go ahead and put your vote there. What you think? Okay, I see a couple chats. Go ahead, put whatever you think. Chat to save time. Yep, that's why I was asking, because I saw chat is better. Okay, I'm getting a lot of chats. Okay, well, let's do this by chat then. I'm sorry if you're a person who wanted to interview, but I do agree the time is moving on, and let's use our time well. We're very conscious of our time. I like to have discussions. I wish we were in the classroom, because I'd like to stand in front of you or sit next to you and listen and hear what you guys have to say. Yeah. Okay, let's do it by chat. Go ahead, everybody, put your comments there. I'll put up the card again. Let me put this back up so you can see it. Okay, and I'm looking at the chat too, and I'll make comments if I see anything. Let's let this go for a little bit. Let's take our time to hear what you guys have to say about what, Again, you can answer anything about this topic, anything about who you are as a researcher or what you're interested in, or anything, or these 3 questions. Yes, I can send grounded theory stuff to anybody who's interested. Yeah. I have grounded theory. I actually have some articles about grounded theory that I had to give to somebody recently. I think I showed you that in my search. I was looking for that. So I actually have some access to grounded theory. Don't feel like you have to follow my theory. You have to find your own, but I'll send, if anybody wants, I'll put it up on the page. I'll put it up on our homepage. just to let you see what grounded theory is about, just for one example. Yeah, any other comments you guys want to put, like discuss? Maybe you're typing right now. Oh, good, you're welcome. Yeah, glad, hopefully this is helpful. Mixed approach, yeah, that's what I was going to talk about next. Here's one of you guys is Chon Kyu Mian. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with pronouncing your names, and I feel really embarrassed by trying. So I'm sorry, but yeah, he's saying, I believe he is saying that most of the time he uses a mixed approach, and me too, because I see qualitative and quantitative as kind of a tool. The whole, my design is I use whatever I need to use. I'll throw surveys, I'll use interviews, whatever I need. Qualitative, since I am bad at numbers, yeah. You got to be good at numbers for quantitative, for sure. Joy, yeah, joy. That's nice. Okay, any other comments? We'll go for a little bit longer, for another few minutes. See what you have to say. Yeah, that's a good, I like that. On Chuan Hui, I guess, on Chuan Hui. The comment there, you guys can see all the comments, right? Can you guys give me a thumb up over here in the reactions or something? Or just say, yeah. You guys can see the comments, can't you? Like me? If you can see the comments, just say yes. Put a yes on there so I can see a few of you can read all the comments. Okay, good. Okay, just making sure. I like that comment there. I'm not so sure. I haven't done any real research, but it's hard to solely do qualitative method for non-native speakers to do analyzing. There. I'm going to show you in the resources section. I'm just going to point to them. In just a minute or two, I'll point to the resources that can help you. These programs and things that can help you to do analysis, where at least it takes the hard part, or the part that's kind of repeated, the part that makes it seem like work. These programs can help you to take that out, because it is hard for your qualitative. But that's a good question. Is it harder for a non-native speaker to do qualitative or quantitative? I think that depends on your personality. If you're not good with numbers, I think you would have a hard time no matter. Maybe more experimental would be harder, but certainly observational, case studies or kind of more simple kind of relationships might be easier, where you're just observing. What is your preferred method? For those who are new to research, yeah, for a beginner, what is most appropriate for a beginner? If this, again, it should be qualitative, yeah, then quantitative. I think I don't think it's set, my own opinion. I agree with that. I've heard a lot of people who think that, but I think that that when you're a beginning researcher, I don't think you should worry again about, look at my list here. Number in the qualitative section, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the quantitative 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, when you're a beginning researcher, I think you do have to kind of know yourself. You have to kind of know number 1 and number 2, because that kind of, you need to know that for even quantitative or qualitative. You need to know what your kind of outlook, as we heard, your outlook. How do you see things? You have to know that to begin. But I think once you get that down, you're ontological. You don't really need, that's kind of more philosophy, but your epistemological and your paradigm, your basic kind of philosophy of life and research, you kind of need to figure that out a bit. And then from there, don't worry about methodology or anything else yet. I think you begin again with that cluster, with that kind of analysis or, cluster map or mind map. I think you begin with what you're interested in. And then from there, you start to go and decide, you start to decide how would I collect this data? How would I do it? Would I use, what kind of methods are there available? And you can go to many different books. I might put a site up for you that kind of shows you where you can see a sample. I think that might be helpful for you guys. I'll make a note to myself to include that for you, a sample of different methods that kind of give you an idea, an overview of each that you can choose from. Like, okay, which one is suitable to who I am and to this kind of thing I'm interested in researching. So that's what I think you do as a beginner. And then you let your methodology come from that. And then your data collection, again, I think for everybody, your data collection techniques have to change. And again, whether you choose quantitative or qualitative, you might choose quantitative things as part, and you end up being a mixed researcher like me, or like another participant here. Would you please give us more information about the merits and drawbacks of quantitative and qualitative methods? Yeah. I very briefly, I can do that really quickly. Again, what are the drawbacks and the merits of each of these two methods? Well, the obvious ones we've already talked about. If you're more qualitative, you're interested in kind of, again, as we see here, you're more interested in kind of interacting with people and being social. Basically, qualitative research is more social in nature. You're going to interact with your participants. Quantitative, you tend not to interact with your participants. And wait a minute, in experimental and quasi-experimental, you are interacting. But what I mean by interacting, I mean that you are having a kind of dialogue, a kind of back and forth, where they and you are having kind of equal position. And that relationship is important in qualitative. But in quantitative, no, it shouldn't be. You should already have the whole thing set, and you're just doing that thing and they are reacting to it. Or you're just sitting there watching. You're not interacting at all for observational stuff. So that's a big kind of difference. Is that a bonus? Is that an attribute? Is that a good thing, a merit, or is that a drawback? Well, it depends again on your nature and what you're studying. But are you a social person who likes to give interviews and your personality is part of the research? Then you're going to be more qualitative. And when you choose your methodology too, you have to kind of say that to you have to admit that up front to people. You have to tell, when you're writing your paper, you need to be with qualitative, you need to kind of tell the reader why you need to kind of justify why you're using your methodology. Qualitative needs to justify itself more than quantitative in that you have to kind of tell a narrative more. It's more narrative by nature, storytelling. It's more, again, more overall, and it has more of a, you need to connect things more from different pieces and parts, and your interactions and being social with the participants is a part of the research. Quantitative, you're telling a story, but you're focused on one specific thing. You're not really trying to relate it to many different things. You're trying to eliminate and focus more and more when you're doing quantitative. You're trying to look at one specific thing because you want a more definite answer. So that's the most I can say right now. Yeah, it's also definitely which topic you're working on. I agree. Yeah, definitely. I agree with Hyun Tae Hao, Thi Hao. I like to find out the exact answers. Reckon the importance of exploration of the unique each subject I want to analyze, not just true, false, or numbers. Yeah, again, you got to know yourself, and the quicker you do, you really want to know yourself. Again, the main reason you want to know yourself is because you generally don't change. Again, these number 1 and 2, you don't change. You won't change. People don't change that much. number 3 and 4, you might change. Yeah. Or you might be more quantitative, right? But the reason you want to know yourself the most is because it saves you time. Because once you study a particular methodology, particular techniques, you know them, you don't have to go back and start over again. So that's going to save you time. And that's, again, saving time is really important for all of us. Okay, speaking of time, we have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to move on. Just to kind of point to this stuff, I'm just going to go through it quickly because these are just basic tips. We've talked about this last time. Title, background, research questions, methodology, your plan, and references, right? This is, if you're trying to make a proposal, you start it with your brainstorming. You did a kind of lit review, kind of, literature review where you went through whatever style and you made maybe some annotated bibliography. And now you're ready to kind of put it together. Some people might do this before they annotate it and all that, before they go doing research. It's up to you. But again, you can start by trying to make a title. Someone asked, what makes a good title? Well, when you first start making your title at the beginning on a proposal, just put the facts. Later, you can put that kind of inference in part of your title. I'll talk about that next webinar, because I'm going to be talking about how to get published, and that matters. The title matters when you're trying. That's one of the ways you can help yourself get published, have a better chance. Background and rationale, again, we can talk about it. We already did. Brief numbered list, again, can't say that enough, that you should have your research questions listed. Methodology, we talked about that. Again, the plan, again, you come up with a plan like I did. I had 3 stages. This just is you organizing yourself and putting dates to try to make yourself, everybody needs a plan so that you can know what you're doing and be more definite. And of course, like we talked about, references and bibliography are part of that, why you need to do the annotated bibliography. So you list those there. You can go look at these things. These are good research question, kind of a way to decide what makes a good one. We talked about these kinds of, but I think you can read these yourself and find out. Here are 2 examples where it shows you the bad and good, and then it explains. I explained for you underneath why the top one is bad and the bottom one is good. And here's another example. You can go read those later. Here is, I gave you you guys wanted some samples from real studies. So that's what I'm giving you here. You can go read these yourself. Look, I put the title of the research paper. These are related to my project, because I want you to put it all together and see how it related to what I studied for my paper. You can go look at the paper I wrote, and you can see some of these studies that I looked at for annotating. You can see the title. You can see they listed their research questions. So look at these questions. Look how they're written. These are good examples. Here's 3 of them that are pretty standard. Here's the first one is another standard one from China, which is pretty good. This one is a little bit more quantitative, the top one. The bottom one there, look at that. That is very unusual, but this is a way to do it. This is another way to write your research questions. Look at what they did. They said, along these lines, we explored the predictions that, and look at all these predictions. They have 4 predictions. These are their hypotheses. So they're going to test their hypotheses. When you want to test hypotheses, generally that's more quantitative in nature. If you want to explore, that's more qualitative usually, when you want to find out new information from a new area. Here's another style of doing that. Look at they did. This was a meta-analysis. Remember we talked about that? Someone asked about that. How do you do a secondary research where you don't do your own research? You just go look at other papers? Well, that's what this story did. You can go type this in and find the article, by the way, or I can put it up for you. But a meta-analysis where they looked at all these different studies, and they didn't do their own. They just looked, and these were different hypotheses they had. They had 6 of them. That's a lot. I don't recommend this many. I think it's too many. I think that's a mistake. I think they should only have 3 or less. Maybe you might have 5 if they relate to each other. But 6 and a research question at the end, wow, this was a different kind of article. But you can do that. Here's, by the way, how they handled that. Sorry, it's not very clear, but all of these hypothesis and research questions, this is what they put in a table, which I thought was nice, because they have so many of these. I like that they listed them, right? They listed them. Here's the research question, which they say are the gaps, right? What's missing, they want to know, and here's what they found. And then here's how it relates, right? Here's how it relates to each hypothesis. So they did a nice, I like this table. It's very simple and clear, and it shows how it relates to what they're trying to figure out. I put some papers here for you that are about Vietnam. So you can actually go look at the way they design them. I think these are from 2014, both of them, but I like them. They're pretty good. This one's from Sage Open, which is a very good source, and it's open. You can actually get these articles for free from Sage Open. You can find that on the database stuff. But I put it here so you can find it easily and just look at it. Again, look at how they use it, tables. Okay, and again, I put another one here for you too that's about Australia, an Australian Vietnamese study that I think was very well done, but a different style kind of. But look at the way they did it and put their questions, clear 2 research questions there, very simple, clear. And look how they did it. Look at the tables. Again, just look at this as an example, because this is something that you could do in your area, okay? And now I want to point to resources, again, databases, reference apps, and analysis programs. I don't need to say anything except these are examples. You guys said that you wanted to be able to access papers. Well, here you go. You will not find a more extensive list, I think, very easily than this. All of these are useful. You see, there's a lot of these are just places where you can get research articles. You see number 7 is CIA Fact Book. That's a good place to find basic facts about countries. If you ever want to know things about countries where you need to write down demographics, like how many people, how many students, how many, basic things. Of course, it's from a US perspective. So you got to remember whether you want to do that. Number 8 is also one of the most commonly cited in publications. Pew Research Center is a giant. And it gives you mostly US statistics, but it also gives you world perspective stuff too. Going down the list, you can see number 12, it has a lot of UK, United Kingdom, England focus. Going down, you can see some of the ones that you guys put. I don't know about 15. That was one of you guys put that as a reference. I saw it looks pretty good. Number 16 was quite good. One of you put this one. That was a very good suggestion. I looked at it. It's very good for books. You can get a whole book there. That's like going to the library. It's great. Of course, ResearchGate and academia we talked about. This is the one I found just 30 minutes before we started. Open access. Go look at that one. That's actually really good. Okay. And these are apps that you can use to organize your research. Once you get articles, these are apps. See, EndNote actually has a basic function, a basic program that you can use for free. So you don't have to pay for EndNote. You can actually use the basic version for free online. There are some others that are completely free. You can see that number 4 is not, but it's also can be used as part of this one, research analysis. You see the number 1 and 2 are the most common qualitative. You have to pay for them. They're expensive. Number 3, 4, and 5 are free quantitative ones. I have a special handout also file that I put up on the page for number 4 about how to use R. That can help you. Number 6 and number 7 are qualitative ones you have to pay for. I use number 6. I paid for it because I do the same methodology over and over. It's worth the $600 or so it cost. It's expensive, but it's worth it because I use the same method over and over and over, and it's worth it. 7 is another one. Number 8 and number 9 and number 10 are all free. Those are qualitative ones you can use that are free. Okay, those are resources. You guys asked for them. Hopefully those are helpful for you. And I think we're out of time with just a minute left. I'll point again to I didn't do this last time, but for our next webinar, we're going to be talking about the, getting published, the important part, right? The final stage here. We're going to explore about how you submit a manuscript. And I really want to talk to you about how to choose your journals and how you interact with those peer reviewers and the editors to give yourself the best chance to get it through the gate and to get it published. So that's what we're going to focus on, okay? All done.
Thank you, Thomas. Have you posted the links of the references that you just mentioned in the website? I mean, in the webinar website?
Yeah, let me just point to it real quick. Did I get rid of the website already by accident? Did I click it out? Well, I can find it. What is it? It's there it is. Yeah, I put for our webinar today, I put it here in the materials discussed and supplements. You can see there's the resources there for you.
Yes.
There's the research question samples that I gave you. And again, the introduction to that free quantitative program, the R, and choosing your approaches, I put that up there too. But the resources, again, if you click on that, you get the PDF, and the PDF is clickable. So you can click on these links and go right to them. Okay?
Yes. Thank you. I asked this question for everybody because I know that many participants are interested in extra materials. And you see in the chat box, there are some comments and questions. If you have already answered to the questions, it's great. But for a certain reason, for example, if the comments or the question is a big question, then we need more discussion. I suggest that you can, give in the discussion forum in the Tech4Teach platform for all participants. Because maybe during the webinar, we focused on the contents of the webinar and we forget to answer in details about certain questions or comments from participants. Is this okay, Thomas?
Yes, I should have mentioned that I did put a survey kind of thing, like to, for people to give me comments about what they need more of or what. And I'm not sure, I haven't used that before, but let me show you that real quick. Again, on this page here, on our home page.
Yes.
In webinar number 1, I put webinar feedback here. And I tried to set this up for you, but I don't know if I did it right, because this is, again, this Moodle is a little different than ours.
Yes.
But you can see, what did you like? What could be improved? What do you want us to focus on more? So for every webinar, yeah, this is very useful to me. Maybe I can just set up a discussion board general, just a big board. I think that's what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay, I'll set up maybe at the top of the page, up here in the top column, right up in here. We have burning questions. I think you already set that up, right? Maybe burning questions might be the place to do it. So
yes.
Participants.
Okay, we can put in the Q&A for open discussion, not only between the participants with you, but the participants themselves can also join the discussion, because this is a network of researchers, right? To learn, a community practice to learn. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm afraid this is a time for those of you who were late this afternoon, or some of you sent a direct message to me asking about the Tech4Teach platform, because Thomas posted quite a lot of extra materials in the Tech4Teach platform. So if you have not received your account and password to access Tech4Teach platform, please send an email again to Ms. Châu Hoàng Lang. She will help you to get the account to access the Tech4Teach. And I hope that many of you, all of you, will attend the next webinar on Wednesday afternoon, October the 19th, again with Thomas. Thank you very much, Thomas, for a wonderful webinar today. A very heavy topic, but I think that you deliver the topic in a very, interesting way. And it's very attractive to all participants. Thank you very much, everybody from Honora Vietnam, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you and goodbye, and see you again next week.
Great. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you all for participating.
Yeah.